There was a time when things felt different. You can probably remember it, even if you cannot pinpoint exactly when it changed. A time when anticipation had weight to it. When looking forward to something actually felt like something. When a good meal, a conversation, a film, a piece of music could land with a fullness that you felt in your body. Now things arrive and pass without leaving much behind. You finish something you wanted and feel nothing in particular. You scroll through options for entertainment and find nothing that compels you enough to choose. You make plans and feel a vague obligation rather than genuine excitement. You wonder, sometimes, whether something is wrong with you. Whether you have become someone who simply does not feel things the way you used to. Nothing is wrong with you, but something has changed. And it did not happen by accident. To understand what has happened, you need to understand what dopamine actually is. Because almost everything you have been told about it is wrong. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. That framing is everywhere, and it is almost entirely incorrect. Dopamine does not deliver the feeling of satisfaction. It delivers the feeling of wanting. It is the neurological engine of anticipation, of pursuit, of the drive toward a reward rather than the reward itself. The pleasure you feel when you finally get the thing, that is a different system entirely. Running on opioids your brain produces itself. This distinction matters more than it might seem, because it means that dopamine is not a response to getting. It is a response to the gap between where you are and where the reward is. It is activated by the chase, by the signal that something worth having might be available, by uncertainty with a positive lean. The neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz, whose work on dopamine prediction errors transformed the field, demonstrated that dopamine neurons fire most intensely not when the reward arrives, but in the moment of anticipation. And they fire even more intensely when the reward is unpredictable. Your brain is not a reward-collecting machine. It is a reward-seeking machine, and someone has been exploiting that difference for years. Every platform you use, every feed, every notification system, every infinite scroll is built on what behavioral scientists call a variable reward schedule. This is the same mechanism that makes slot machines the most addictive form of gambling ever designed. Not because winning is guaranteed, but because winning is unpredictable. Sometimes the scroll delivers something genuinely interesting. Mostly, it does not. The ratio does not matter. The unpredictability is the point. Each time you pick up the phone, your brain does not know what it will find. That uncertainty, that gap between the reach and the reward, is precisely the condition that triggers the strongest dopamine response. Not the content you discover, the act of reaching for it, the app opening, the feed refreshing. You have been pulling the lever of the most sophisticated slot machine ever built, hundreds of times a day, every day, for years. And like every gambler who has ever sat in front of a machine, you have paid a price that had nothing to do with money. The price is your baseline. Here is what most explanations of dopamine get wrong. The problem is not that you are getting too much of it. The problem is what happens to your sensitivity over time. The brain is a calibration machine. It does not experience things in absolute terms. It experiences them relative to what it has learned to expect. When you expose any biological system to repeated, intense stimulation, it adapts, it downregulates. It reduces its sensitivity to that stimulus in order to maintain equilibrium. This is why the first coffee of your life felt more powerful than the 5th year of daily caffeine. This is why the first time you heard a song you loved hit differently than the 100th. Your dopamine system works the same way. After years of high-frequency, low-effort stimulation, the constant micro-rewards of notification, novelty, and variable reinforcement, your brain has recalibrated what a normal level of stimulation looks like. It has raised the floor. And everything that exists below that floor now registers as nothing. The meal that would have felt genuinely pleasurable before now barely moves the needle. The conversation that would have been engaging now feels flat. The film that would have absorbed you now cannot hold your attention past the first slow scene. Not because these things have become worse, because your reference point has shifted so far in one direction that ordinary life, real life, life without algorithmic amplification, no longer generates enough signal to feel like anything. This is called dopamine desensitization. And you are almost certainly living inside it right now. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we suppress, deny, and refuse to examine, because looking at them is uncomfortable. But he also understood something about the relationship between comfort and vitality that cuts directly to this. For Jung, the psyche's deepest need was not pleasure. It was meaning. And meaning, unlike stimulation, cannot be delivered in fragments. It cannot be consumed in 30-second clips. It requires depth, duration, and the willingness to remain with something past the point where it becomes difficult. What the overstimulated, desensitized brain loses is not just the capacity to feel pleasure. It loses the capacity for meaning, because meaning lives in exactly the register of experience that high-stimulation scrolling destroys. Slow, sustained, reflective, fully present. When your nervous system has been tuned to expect constant novelty, sitting with one thing long enough for it to matter becomes almost neurologically impossible. This is the hidden cost that no one mentions. Not just that things feel less exciting, but that the experience of depth, the kind of absorption that makes life feel like it is worth living, becomes increasingly inaccessible. You may have noticed it in the things that used to matter most. The hobby you loved and then abandoned, not because you stopped caring about it, but because starting it required a kind of activation energy that was never there anymore. The relationships where you found yourself present in body, but somewhere else, entirely in mind. The ambitions that felt real once, and now feel like something you remember wanting, rather than something you actually want. This is not depression, though it can look like depression from the outside and feel like it from the inside. It is a neurological condition with a specific cause and, crucially, a specific reversal mechanism. The brain that has downregulated its dopamine sensitivity can upregulate it again. The floor that has been raised can come back down. The experience of finding ordinary life genuinely rewarding, the meal, the conversation, the walk, the slow afternoon, is not gone. It has been buried under a layer of artificial stimulation so thick that it cannot currently be reached. Remove the stimulation, and it comes back. This is the part that requires honesty, because it is also the part that is genuinely difficult. The reversal process is uncomfortable when you reduce high stimulation input, when you spend less time on the feed, when you create actual gaps of unoccupied time, when you stop reaching for the phone every time a moment of stillness appears. The first thing you feel is not peace. It is a restlessness that borders on distress. The recalibrated brain, accustomed to a constant supply of dopamine triggers, experiences their absence as a problem to be solved. It generates agitation, boredom, a low-level anxiety that pushes hard toward the familiar relief of picking the phone back up. Most people stop here. They interpret the discomfort as evidence that something is wrong, rather than evidence that something is right. They mistake the withdrawal for the disease. But if you stay with it, If you tolerate the flatness and the restlessness without immediately medicating them with more input, something begins to happen. Slowly, then noticeably, the sensitivity starts to return. The floor begins to lower. The things that stopped registering start to land again. A piece of music you had not heard in a while catches you unexpectedly. A meal tastes like something. A conversation holds your attention without effort. These are not small things. They are the return of your own capacity to be here, fully, in a life that is happening in real time and not on a screen. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you cannot become anything in a state of constant reaction. You cannot hear your own depths over the noise of a feed designed to drown them out. The person you are when you are genuinely engaged, genuinely absorbed, genuinely moved by something, that person requires conditions that the attention economy is structurally opposed to providing. You have not lost the ability to feel. It has been borrowed, siphoned, click by click, into a system that converts your neurological capacity for wonder into quarterly revenue figures. The excitement you remember is not a relic of youth. It is not something that simply fades with age and must be accepted as lost. It is something that is recoverable, but only by withdrawing the resource that has been extracted. Protect your dopamine system like the finite, precious, irreplaceable thing it is, not because a productivity guru told you to, but because the depth of your own experience, the degree to which your life feels like yours, vivid and real and worth being present for, depends on it entirely. If this video helps you see your mind more clearly, subscribe. Every video on this channel is built around one goal: giving you back something the noise has been taking. Stay close. What comes next goes even deeper.